In today's episode, we are talking to R.T. Custer. He's an entrepreneur, a dreamer, and a champion of American manufacturing. He's the founder of Vortic Watch Company and Colorado Watch Company. Now, I got to be honest with you here. Coming into this podcast today, I was like, cool, we're going to hear about a watch company. We're going to hear about the entrepreneurial story. But it turned into so much more. If you're an entrepreneur facing hard things, you're going to want to hear this. If you're an entrepreneur that doesn't know what's next, you're going to want to hear this. If you're an entrepreneur that just doesn't know what the future holds for you, you're going to want to watch this. This guy was sued by the largest watch company on the planet for nearly 6 years, and he came out on top. The story of how and who he met and what he had to do to overcome is unbelievable. In today's podcast, yes, you're going to hear a story of a watch company on a mission, but more importantly, you're going to hear a story of determination and grit to get there. You're going to want to tune in.
Trying to reach my goals, got no time for mistakes. Yeah, I'm standing on business, need a big safe. Suited up, got the blueprint in the briefcase. It's go time on the grind, these are big stakes.
Broadcasting from the Franchise Sidekick studio, welcome to the Sidekick Life. Get ready for stories of passion, problem solvings, and success from those living life on their terms.
Well, this is an exciting one. Welcome to another episode of the Sidekick Life. Today we are with R.T. Custer, and this one's awesome. It's extra special for me. It's a friend, former business partner. This one's awesome, man. So founder of Vortic Watch Company, Colorado Watch Company. There's so many other titles you could have, dude. But let's just kick this thing off and get it going. So R.T., tell us about yourself, your background, and an overview of your company.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. And nice to see you, Tyler. So long story short, or try to make a long story short, I grew up on a Christmas tree farm in Pennsylvania. And I was a fourth generation entrepreneur and farmer. And we had 40 acres. And I grew up learning how to, cut the trees, trim the trees, drag the trees to the truck, bring them up to the barn and sell the trees just once a year. And there's so many lessons that I learned from that, but I somehow ended up studying engineering at Penn State. And while I was at Penn State studying mostly logistics, that's why I ended up getting a job with Walmart in logistics out of school. But during the time that I was at Penn State, I worked for a little company. It's an MLM called College Works Painting. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what MLMs were or how that worked at the time. I was just sold. I was like, I get to run my own business for the summer. I just feel like I was born to be an entrepreneur, but, kind of destined to be an engineer. And so I was caught in the middle there. And I ended up being really good at going door to door and selling paint jobs. And so that was my first entrepreneurial venture that was just me, that wasn't the family business. And I just got hooked, and I almost changed my major from engineering to supply chain and go to the business school halfway through school. But I stuck it out. I got a great engineering degree from Penn State. And then I went and worked for the world's largest retailer, solving massive problems, basically renovating distribution centers. And somewhere along the way, I met my co-founder, Tyler Wolf, and we had this crazy idea on the golf course at Penn State one day. Mm-hmm. And it was, can we make watches in America? And we were just talking about watches as we were playing golf, and he was just infatuated with watches. He had his own little collection. I thought it was really cool that he was so passionate about it. And we started asking the question of okay, if we were going to make a watch, or if somebody was going to make a watch, could we make it in America? And that led us down the rabbit hole of, it's really hard to make stuff like that in America. But we used to 100 years ago. And we stumbled on the history of the old pocket watch companies that were around 1850 to 1950 or so. I call them the great American watch companies, Hamilton, Elgin, Illinois, etc. These companies made hundreds of millions of pocket watches in the USA. And my business now is called Vortic, like Vortex and TikTok, a beautiful clash of old and new. We take antique American pocket watches and turn them into wristwatches right here in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Freaking amazing, dude.
RT, just because I bet a lot of people don't know this, you say, watches are no longer made in America. So is there a place that they typically are made? Where are most watch companies out of, or where do they manufacture out of?
Yeah, so I think most people, when they think of watches, they think of Rolex, Omega, the big Swiss companies. So that's Switzerland. But basically, rule of thumb, if you're buying a watch for thousands of dollars, it's most likely Swiss made. If you're buying a watch for dozens of dollars or hundreds of dollars, it's most likely made in China. And there are lots of other, there's some amazing watch companies like Seiko in Japan, but and there's companies in Germany, and there's a few of us here in America doing it. But in general, 80-20 rule, it's Switzerland or China. And that's just the way it's been since about the 1950s, when all these pocket watch companies went out of business. But really that 100 years, 1850 to 1950 or so, we basically, from Boston to Chicago, we were the Switzerland of the world, and we were making pocket watches back then. It's just that today nobody has any use for a pocket watch, so people don't even know they existed.
That's so cool. So tell me, okay, so the ideation is here. You guys are going to make watches. So tell me what that first couple months and then couple years looked like for you and Tyler.
Yeah, so we had the idea back when we were studying at school, and we didn't do a whole lot with it in college. We didn't have any money. we had to get jobs, and so I took a full-time job with Walmart. I got out here to Colorado, and Tyler was working in Philadelphia at the time, and he was running a franchise of a company. Actually, it's called iCracked, fixing iPhones. And he wasn't having the best time of it. Just wasn't loving life. He came out to visit me in Colorado and was like, "Hey, this place is awesome. Like, what do you think if we started that watch company we were dreaming about in college?" And, I was lucky enough. I had a good job. I bought a house when I got here in Colorado, which, thinking back, now that house is like collateral on all my business loans. Like, thank God I bought a house in 2014 when I could. Yeah. But yeah, so we started, he moved out, he moved into my basement. And we put the concept of a pocket watch turned into a wristwatch, which we called Vortic Watch Company, on Kickstarter in 2014. It was November of 2014. And we basically said, we super glued the prototypes together. We 3D printed everything. We basically said, hey, we want to make 100% of the watch in America. That's the core concept here. And the only way to do that is to use these old pocket watches and upcycle them. And then during that Kickstarter campaign, which went pretty well, I think we set the goal of 10,000 because we thought that was a ton of money at the time. I was 22. I was like, if I had $10,000, I can totally start a business. That worked out. I think we raised 40,000 on Kickstarter, which was good. 4 times the goal. It was enough to prove the concept, get product market fit, and all that stuff. But along the way, people started asking, well, what if I have one? What if I have Grandpa's pocket watch? And that was like a light bulb moment for us, because we were like, holy shit, that's really cool. That's a better story than just trying to make something in America. That's preserving American history. That's working with people's family heirlooms. Now we're part of the family. And so we switched the marketing from the only truly American made watch to, we take pocket watches and turn them into wristwatches. Do you have one? And then the business started to do a lot better. And so, 2015, 2016, we started to take off. And, really it took us probably 2 years to figure out how to do it and to perfect the product. Even though we had product market fit, we were like, how do we make hundreds of these and not just onesie twosies here and there? And that's really the hardest part of product development is, you can make one and you can probably figure out how to make 100, but getting above that is very, very hard.
RT, talk about that a little bit more, because in a former life, I had a nutrition company, and the question I get all the time is, how did you make the products? What qualified you to make nutrition products? And my answer was, we used experts. So what qualified you at that point to design and make watches? Or how did you become qualified?
Yeah, so I'd said the qualifications it's just an interesting concept. I always say, I'm just an engineer. I'm not a watchmaker. So I hired master watchmakers and contracted with them to do the restoration on the old pocket watches. That's the hardest part. So, we find pocket watches in estate auctions and pawn shops and stuff. They've been around for 100 years, or somebody sends us Grandpa's watch for our Convert Your Watch service. They've been sitting in a drawer for 50 years or a safe deposit box. They need some love. And that is not, watchmaking is not a skill that most people have. It's mostly a skill that's in Switzerland at this point. And so these watchmakers that I partnered with originally, most of them made the joke, they've been a watchmaker for longer than they've been alive. And that's true for most of them still. And they are just masters at their craft. And they're kind of like, if a general watchmaker, like someone who can just fix a Rolex or a Fossil or something, just any watch, is kind of like it's kind of like a mechanic at a nice, auto shop, right? But I need the people that can work on the Model T Ford, right? Like there's literally 10 watchmakers that can do what we do and fix up these 100-year-old pocket watches in the whole country. And I employ 5 of them, and 3 of them sit behind this wall right here. So like it's a niche within a niche within a niche, and it's all the skilled trade to get back to qualifications. And so, you don't know what you don't know. And so I just dove in, I found the things that I didn't know. And then I found watchmakers that had been doing it for a long time and said, hey, how do we do this? And then I focused on the things that I was good at, and Tyler and I could focus on at that time, which was more of the literal engineering of like, okay, we have a pocket watch, we fixed it up, we restored it, it's telling time. How do we mount a wristwatch case around it? And how do we use modern technology to do that and cut the metal, steel, bronze, titanium to do that? And so really what I've developed over the last 10 years is a manufacturing company that's really good at CNC machining and engineering for small batch production, cutting metal in small batches to fit the criteria of making watches in America.
So what year would this be? So you're starting to scale up here at this point. You're putting everything together. You're starting to scale. It was like 2015, 14, 16, in that ballpark?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. It was like 15, 16 is when, like, for instance, we did $40,000 on Kickstarter in late 2014. I think we made like $96,000 in our entire year in 2015. This was kind of like a side hustle for both of us at that time. And then we really started growing the business in 2016.
Hey Sidekicks, it's Ryan Zink here. I'll never forget the moment I opened my first franchise, helping my first customer, hiring my first employee, and cashing my first check. It wasn't just a business, it was the beginning of living life on my terms. When Tyler and I started Franchise Sidekick, we reimagined how people would find brands and succeed in franchise ownership. We're the fastest growing franchise advisory group in the country because we built a smarter, tech-driven system. Our approach has helped people just like you purchase over 10,000 franchise locations, and we've earned a 5-star rating on Google doing it. Now we're sharing exactly how we do it in a quick 20-minute webinar titled 10,000 Locations and Counting, the Franchise Buyer's Blueprint. If you're ready to explore a path to financial freedom and take control over your future, this is your first step. And did I mention our services are always 100% free? Click the link below to sign up now because you deserve to live life on your terms.
That's awesome. And I'm going to go reminisce a little bit because right about then something happened. Me and you connected, right? So we had just moved to Fort Collins, Colorado. I remember the first time I met you and my wife were like, how do we meet people here? And she went to your significant other's. She had an amazing company at the time. And so she was helping women with, businesses and things like that. And so we connected for dinner one time and you're telling me about what you're doing. I'm like, this is amazing, dude. So we started to nerd out on email marketing and whatever else. And right from then it's like, it's go time. And then you took me to your facility and everything you described like resonated with me. I'm like, this is a legit company, a legit manufacturing company. You had people, CNC machines everywhere. It was an incredible thing. And since then you've moved obviously, but that's when we first connected. We also started, a side kind of business doing another podcast as well. But that's when I started to really kind of get to know you really well. And then stuff started to kind of get interesting with Swiss. So maybe talk about that lawsuit that happened.
Yeah. So we got sued by the largest company in our industry, the Swatch Group, which is a multi-billion-dollar foreign conglomerate based in Switzerland. Swatch owns Omega, for instance. Omega is their largest brand, but they have about 32 different brands, including Omega and Hamilton Watch Company. And they sued us over counterfeiting and trademark infringement. And the reason is, and the lawsuit's called Hamilton v. Vortic. So Hamilton's one of the subsidiaries of the Swatch Group. But the original Hamilton Watch Company was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania from I'm going to butcher this, but I think it was 1895 until, 1969. And the Swatch Group purchased the trademarks and the rights to that company after it went out of business. So sometime in the 70s, they rolled the Hamilton watch brand into their, conglomerate. But those, the pocket watches that were made by the original Hamilton Watch Company in Pennsylvania in the early 1900s, we salvaged those and we turned them into wristwatches. And I put an advertisement in one of the big watch magazines in 2015 that had a Hamilton pocket watch turned into a wristwatch. I called it a Vortic watch. And I said, contact a watchmaker at Vortic to convert your pocket watch into a wristwatch. And we used a beautiful Hamilton pocket watch because, I don't know, that was the business model.
Yeah.
And then we got a cease and desist. And then we got a lawsuit. And the cease and desist happened. We got before, I think it was about 3 months before we shipped our first watch to our first customer. Because we did Kickstarter, so they're all pre-orders. So I got sued before we even really started. And then it turned into a real lawsuit in 2017 after a bunch of back and forth when I just kind of had to educate myself on how trademarks work. And fast forward to, it took until 2020 to actually get to court. And February 19 of 2020, I was sitting in Manhattan in the Southern District of New York in this massive courtroom with, ceramic ceilings and just like stone walls and stuff. It was the coolest experience ever. And like looking up at this judge, taking my watch off and saying like, this is what we do. And my attorney at the time, he said, whatever you do, don't stop talking because you've never done anything wrong. So all the judge needs is all the information to be able to protect you. And that's what happened is like, the federal justice system protected me. And what they did was they protected the right or the art of upcycling. And so, yes, I was taking Hamilton pocket watches that said Hamilton right on the face of them, and I was turning them into wristwatches that still said Hamilton on the face of them. But I was turning something old into something new. I was recycling. We also claim that everything we do is art. But really, to me, I was defending the entire business model of the company. Because if taking a Hamilton pocket watch and turning into a wristwatch was illegal, then taking a Elgin or an Illinois or a Waltham or any of the other old pocket watch brands, that would have also been illegal. And some other people own those trademarks. So I was totally screwed if this was not okay.
Yeah.
And I literally told the judge that. I said, this has been my entire adult life building this company. And if this is illegal to do what I do, then I have to do something completely else. But if it's not, which it doesn't seem like it should be, then, I just need to know the bounds in which I have to play, which the way trademark works, trademark law, you just have to make sure you don't confuse the consumer. As long as the people that are buying the product know what they're buying, then you're okay. And anyway, we officially won that lawsuit in late 2020, went to the appeals court, which was a huge waste of government resources. Literally 6 federal judges reviewed the 40-page document that the first judge wrote. Defending us. They all approved it. One of them it was a Zoom call, it was a pandemic. So it was the Zoom call with all these federal judges. One of the judges was like clearly on my website on the Zoom and was like, these are cool. My attorney just lost it. He's like, that never happens. He's like, he literally was like, what if I have one? So he's probably a customer. I don't know. I don't know his name, but some federal judge in the Court of Appeals. And anyway, we won the Court of Appeals, and then the Swatch Group and Hamilton, they had to decide, I think it was like early 2022, whether or not to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. And they decided against that because they had probably spent millions of dollars, coming after me. At that point, I had, almost lost everything multiple times, sold my car to make payroll. Like I was freaking out. And that was a 6-year legal battle. Where, I call it a, 6-year MBA, honestly. Like I learned everything I had to learn, and, knock on wood, here we are. We're still making watches and we won.
Man, good for you. That's such a interesting story. So it's like, the little guy won, which is cool, but it gets me thinking a little bit about this whole legal process, right? So I do have a couple of questions on it. First, did anybody from Hamilton ever reach out to you prior to the lawsuit?
No. So someone saw the magazine article or the magazine ad that I put out, and they saw it in Canada at one of the retail stores, and then they sent it over to Switzerland, and then I got a cease and desist. So
and maybe you wouldn't have changed anything, but I just hate that. I hate that companies, instead of just picking up the phone and talking to another person and saying, "Hey, what's up? Tell me about this," instead they feel like, well, we're just going to sue. And then I'm sure It turned into we're the big 800-pound gorilla. You're the little guy, and we're just going to continue to squeeze, right? If it cost them millions of dollars, they figured you'd probably run out. So I'm so happy that you didn't. I'm so happy that you prevailed. And you told a little bit. You talked a little bit about that strategy. It just when it comes to that too, I was curious, what were they claiming as damages? So were they obviously trademark infringement? I suppose was a big piece of it. But what about the actual damages? Like, how did they? And only share what you're comfortable sharing. But what were they saying you did to damage their brand?
Yeah. So basically, the damages in this case, to my understanding, would have been every dollar I made in revenue selling products that had their name on it. Right. So, which we included. I can't talk about what we talked about in the settlement conferences, but I can say in some of the discussions we had, and some like with myself and my attorney, we thought about disclosing to the whole world exactly how many dollars we've made off of taking Hamilton pocket watches and turning them into wristwatches, because that was maybe 15% of my revenue at the time. There was, there's other companies, there's Elgin, if you go to, our website now, most of them you'll see are Illinois or Elgin. It's the other branch. You'll see some Hamiltons on there, but like it's, there was one of 10 companies. And so it wasn't a huge portion of our revenue. And our revenue throughout most of the lawsuit was six figures, so we're talking about probably 5 figures in annual damages that, they were spending 7 figures to come after me for. And to your point, it was, honestly, when you sum it up, it was basically a hard conversation between me and the anti-counterfeiting officer, the chief anti-counterfeiting officer of the Swatch Group, which, first of all, if you have to have a chief anti-counterfeiting officer, that's a whole nother level, right? It's a massive billions, millions, but like it should have been just to sit down with myself and that gentleman where we just talk about this and say, first of all, dude, like I am a blip on the radar. Like I am just a kid in America trying to make a buck. And I literally sent that. I wrote a letter because they never reached out to me, but I wrote a letter, a handwritten letter. I probably should have done it a little nicer. It wasn't like, it was kind of slow. When you try to write a handwritten letter, it wasn't quite perpendicular to the page. Like it was bad. In hindsight, I could have done a better job on the quality of this letter, but I wrote a letter and mailed it to the CEO of the Swatch Group. And I basically said, tell me a day and a time and I will be there. I will fly to you anywhere in the world. I will put my watches in your hands and I will explain to you exactly what we do. And I think over a cup of coffee, we can either be friends or you can decide to keep coming after me. But like, I just need 5 minutes to show you because I really think this is a miscommunication. And I got an email from the chief legal officer of the Swatch Group. And they said, the letter that you wrote was just as much of a waste as the postage it took to get here. And I quote. And so at that point, I don't know exactly when that was, but that was probably a year or two, right? I think it was about a year before we went to trial. And at that point, when I got that letter back, I was like, yep, it doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what I do. We either got to take this all the way and I got to prove my innocence, or I have to give up. And when I received that response, the attorney I had at that time gave up and everybody else basically gave up. And that's one of the times I almost lost everything, is because I could have given up at that time and it would have been very easy to do so. And I almost did. I sat in my parking lot of my building and I Googled best Colorado bankruptcy attorney.
Oh, I gotta jump in here, dude. Like, here's where I play a role in this, and I still regret it to this day. And I'm proud that you didn't listen to me. We had a mastermind, and we're part of a mastermind. The RT ran. I was part of that mastermind. We had convinced them that day to give up in that mastermind.
Oh, wow.
And I'm the one that kind of led it. I was like, you got to call it quits, dude. You got to call it quits. Like, this is going to destroy you, your family, because you were so stressed. Your kid, like, it was a horrible time, right? And I'm like, it's time to give up. You're not going to win this. And so you Googled bankruptcy attorney based on our recommendation. And then it wasn't
just you. It was basically everyone in my life. My parents, my dad didn't say it. My dad was always very positive, and he's just, whatever you want to do, do it. He was one of the few. I don't think my I don't think my wife, Lindsay, ever like expressly said, to give up, but like she was encouraging me to explore other options, which I did. And so, yeah, I Googled best Colorado bankruptcy attorney. And I called the first one, and I found Rob Lance, who was the attorney that took me all the way to federal court and defended us. And it was crazy because when I got on the phone with him, first of all, his assistant was just like, he never has free time. Like, this dude's busy. Like, but somebody just no-showed a meeting with him. He's probably got 20 minutes. Do you want to talk to him right now? And I was like, yes, like I really need to talk to somebody right now. Like, I'm considering bankruptcy. And I get on the phone with him. We probably talked for like an hour and a half. And we're friends now. And he sat down and told me later on, he was just like, honestly, dude, like I thought you were suicidal. Like I wasn't. Like I have a pretty strong mental health, but like that was definitely the lowest point I've ever been in my life. And so I'm not surprised that he thought that. And really, I thought I was going to lose everything. I thought I was going to lose the business and all this stuff. And this was probably a month before I had my first child. So, big deal, right? Like I just traded up to an SUV. I'm putting, I mean, you guys know, right? Like that's a whole nother level of stress. Like, holy shit, I'm gonna be a dad. And I'm trying to provide for a family now too. And so anyway, he says, I have good news and bad news. Good news is, he said, bad news is I'm not the type of bankruptcy attorney that you're looking for. I'm the type of attorney that when big companies falsely file for bankruptcy, I go after them and say like, hey, you don't actually need to file bankruptcy like this. He was like a bulldog attorney that like makes sure that the law is actually upheld in that case. And he's like, the good news is my partner here at the law firm is an expert in trademarks and I can help you. And yeah, it gives me goosebumps every time to think about this story because I mean, he saved everything. And I didn't pay. The first thing I said was I have no money, obviously. So like, if we want to keep fighting, I can't pay you. And I don't think I paid him for 12 months. And he flew to New York with me on his own dime and he sat there in front of the judge and crushed it, and we left that courtroom that day in 2020, which was literally like 5 days before the bottom fell out in 2020. This is like late February in Manhattan in 2020. So not the best place to be. But we left the courtroom and I was like, how did I do? And he just hugged me and was just like, you fucking crushed it. And so we knew we won, but then, then the pandemic hit. So it took 6 months for us to get the ruling. So that was one of the most 6 months, stressful 6 months I had. And like I said, long story short, it was definitely a David and Goliath. I learned a lot, and a lot of that, Tyler, like I don't hold anything against you and anyone else who said like, who recommended that maybe I should, throw in the towel, because that's probably what I should have done. Mm-hmm. It all goes back to like everything I talk about today. I have a YouTube show called American Dreamers. And I'm a dreamer and I love the concept of the American dream. And I talk about it every day, all the time. And I think to be a dreamer and to be an entrepreneur, you have to be delusional. There is some sort of thing wrong with us that we don't listen to the people that tell us the logical thing to do. And we just keep fighting. And thankfully for me, it worked. It doesn't work for everybody, but for me, it worked.
Man, and Tyler has given me the highlights of this story, but not the detail. And it's amazing. I'm sitting here like totally just listening to every word you're saying, wanting to know what's next, because you faced obstacle after obstacle and curveball after curveball. Everybody's telling you to quit. And the guy that you call to say, help me go bankrupt, is the guy that saves the day. It's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. I just can't. Yep. I don't even, you need to call whoever made Aaron Brockovich and tell him to make a movie out of you, because it's amazing. Good for you, man. Good for you. And you know what? And this is a lesson for all of the aspiring entrepreneurs that are listening to this. Usually when you ask somebody what's it take, number one thing they talk about is grit. You are going to face hard things. You have to push through. You've got to be focused. You got to believe in the dream. And you did that times a million. So congratulations. I'm so excited for what it's become. And I think I want to transition this now to maybe a brighter side and a question that I love to ask. It took a while for you, it sounds like. So you started this in what? You said 2013?
Yeah. 14 is when we did the Kickstarter. So it's been 10 years.
14. And then 2020 is, the tail end of the lawsuit. And still at that point, you're like, what's going to happen? So can you think of a time, the thing that happened when you were like, it works. It's a company. It's going to work. It's successful. It's not going anywhere. Like, what is that thing? You vividly remember what happened in the lawsuit. Can you vividly remember that day or time that was like, we got it?
Yeah. November 11th of 2019.
Wow. Knows the day. He knows the day.
12 noon Mountain Time. I can tell you the exact fucking minute. So we make, vorticwatches.com/military. It's called the military edition, and it's the coolest watch on the planet. And yes, I'm biased, but that is a fact. Everything I just said is a fact. We take antique American pocket watches that were flown on B-17 flying fortresses in World War II, and we turn them into wristwatches just once a year on Veterans Day, which is 11/11. The only day and time you can buy it is 12 noon Mountain Time on Veterans Day. I had that idea in 2019, and it was the idea that I thought might save us from the lawsuit. I needed to raise $100,000 to defend us against, to go to trial in early 2020. And someone sent us one of these pocket watches and told us the story sometime in early 2019. And they made Hamilton. Ironically enough, it was a Hamilton pocket watch. Hamilton made 120,000 of this pocket watch. It was called the Master Navigator's Watch. And they made 120,000 of them just from 1938 until 1947. And I had the idea to take 50 of them a year, just 50 pieces a year, turn them into wristwatches. And every year we would change the case, the outside of it, but every year inside would be the same. And we would call it the military edition. And I knew in my soul that this was like the coolest thing ever. But when it launched, that first year, 2019, we were probably on pace to do $750,000 in total revenue that year. But I put up 50 of these watches at $5,000 a piece, which $5,000 was a lot to us back then. The average watch we sold was probably $1,800 at that point. 5,000 a piece, 50 of them, and we sold all of them in less than 24 hours. And I changed the entire outlook of the company and my life and made $250,000 in a day. And since, so that's my answer to your question, because that's when I knew.
Great answer.
It's like,
Great
okay,
answer.
someone is looking out for me, and this was the best idea I've ever had. And now, 6 years have gone by since then. Last year's the 2024 military edition, we charged $9,500 for, basically increased the price by $1,000 a year. And I sold 50 watches this year in 51 minutes.
Wow. Even
at that larger price point. So, when you get that kind of validation from the universe, and then you get it again and again and again, there's all kinds of sub stories to that. Like, we donate to a school called the Veterans Watchmaker Initiative, which teaches U.S. military vets how to be watchmakers. And, since then, they've named a building after me and us and all this stuff. Like we've helped a lot of people, including veterans, through this. And we have a lot of military veteran customers through this. And so, regardless of what you believe, I am a firm believer in karma. And I think that product and the mission behind it and supporting veterans and making not just a cool product, but something that really gives back. And it was the thing that I needed to save us from the lawsuit all at once. I don't know. That dose of karma really came back and hit me in the face in a good way.
Dude, every time I hear the story, I almost get choked up. It's crazy. Awesome. But let's keep it going for the good stuff, because after the lawsuit, it actually turned out pretty positive for you. That's when the PR started to kick up and people started to pick up the story. So once that happened, what happened after your life? What were the things that projected you to the next level? Because I know you were featured in some magazines, a lot of news articles picked up on the story. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, during the lawsuit, I think it was, I can't remember if it was, it was also that day. It was Veterans Day, 2019. I was on Fox News national TV for 6 minutes, which someone has told me in advertising, 6 minutes of national television is millions of dollars in, ad spend, which we got for free because most of the story was about the Veterans Watchmaker School in Delaware and like how we were helping veterans through making this watch. But, you know, I had, I don't know, a minute and a half there where I told a little bit about the lawsuit, and a little bit about, you know, my dream, a little bit about the watch. And so that was one that really helped. Liz from Entrepreneur Magazine, she wrote a story about me. I was the centerfold in Entrepreneur Magazine, I think it was 2021, and it told the whole story of the lawsuit. It was 6 pages, I think 6 or 8 pages in Entrepreneur, which is amazing. I mean, that distribution is massive. So those were probably the two, you know, really big hits. Somewhere in there, like 21 or 22, Kevin O'Leary got one of my watches as a gift, and he wore it, you know, Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank. He wore it on Shark Tank on, I think it was season 13, the first 2 or 3 episodes, you could see it, a Vortic watch on his wrist. And then he made a YouTube video about how much he liked it, which has millions of views now. And he's just gushing over this watch. And he just finished talking. He was like reviewing his collection with a friend. And he just finished talking about a watch that was worth over $1 million. And then he went to my watch, which is, you know, probably $4,000. And so now still we get emails of like, hey, I just saw this YouTube video with Kevin O'Leary talking about your watch. Like, your watches seem to only be about like $5,000. Like, am I in the right place? Like, I didn't think he owns things that were that cheap, you know? And I'm like, I'll answer all those emails with buy 2, you know, it's great. So that happened, and that was awesome. And then I think the reason we sold out of this past year's military edition so quickly is we got on the wrist of John Krasinski in the show Jack Ryan. And that put us on the map for that, again, for this watch. It's the military edition. And so, you know, people were Googling what watch is John Krasinski wearing on Jack Ryan, and that got them to us. And we got a bunch of news stories about that. And John and his co-star in the show, Michael Kelly, who's my favorite actor and favorite role ever from House of Cards. If you ever watched House of Cards, you know, his role in House of Cards was just phenomenal. And so those two, you know, I've never talked to John Krasinski, but Michael Kelly and I are friends now. He's got a couple watches, and they're just like fans of the brand, and they you know, wear the watches actually just organically out, and we see them all the time. So, you know, you could call all that luck, or you could call it right time, right place, or you could call it 10 years of hustle.
Man, I call it karma. The universe owed you after what you went through. The universe owed you, so you deserved all that stuff, man.
Hopefully I still have some left, because I got time left. I'm still here.
Ways to go, right? By the way, RT is a young dude. Like, how old are you, man?
I'm 34.
34 years old.
Wow.
So he was 20s when he was going through most of this, late 20s, early 30s.
You've lived a couple entrepreneur lives, and you got a lot more in front of you. Good for you. You said something that I think we skipped over really quickly that just caught my attention, though, and I'm really curious how you do it. So there's not a lot of people that I know that are in businesses that only have, you know, less than 20 people in the world that can do it, right? And what'd you say? There's like 10, I think, watchmakers or somewhere in there that are capable of manufacturing for your company and your product. So as an entrepreneur, there's probably some thoughts there like, you know, that's a limited number. How do I stay in front of this? How do I make sure this is a good place for them to land? Will you talk a little bit about how you make sure that you are the place for them to land?
Yeah. Oh, I love this. Thank you, Ryan. So let's zoom out for a second and talk about the skilled trade gap in America. That's the biggest thing. When we're making physical products and I'm cutting metal to turn them into watches here in Colorado, no one does what we do. Just even in CNC manufacturing, but then in actual like watchmaking and building watches. And then again, you know, turning the dial even more and saying, I want to restore a 100-year-old pocket watch, and I need a master watchmaker to do so. There are not enough watchmakers in the world, just like there's not enough plumbers and electricians. People do not realize that they can go to school for 2 years and make more than most people, you know, that were like me, that went to school for, you know, it took me 5 years to get through Penn State. Don't tell anyone. And I spent a ton on that education. And you can go to this Veterans Watchmaker Initiative school in Delaware. You have to be a veteran, but it's free, and it's 2 years, and you come out making as much as an engineer with a 4-year degree. And you have job security for life in a skilled trade, because no one even know. It's not no one wants to do it. It's no one doesn't even know that it's an opportunity for them. And so, I follow and obviously pay attention to people like Mike Rowe and his Mike Rowe Works Foundation. He does a lot of education for the masses on the skilled trades. But in watchmaking, to answer your question, I have to support the schools. So we support the Veterans Watchmaker Initiative, which is one of only 2 independent schools in the country. Most of the watchmaking schools are owned by Rolex or the Swatch Group. And it's kind of like selling your soul. You go to school with them for 2 or 3 years, and then you go to work for them, and you kind of have to. And so there's one, the Veterans Watchmaker Initiative, and then there's also Paris Junior College in Paris, Texas. And it's kind of a newer thing, but there's some great people down there running that school, and they teach people how to fix watches, anything from, a Rolex to a Timex. They can fix it for you, and you can make a really good living doing that. And what I try to do is obviously, put my face on the support that I do for those schools, put it out there, donate as much as I can, talk about it just like I am right now. And then most of the people that have applied to work for me in the last couple years, they've come into their final interview and they tell me like, RT, I kind of know what it's like to work for you already, because I've spent hours watching you on YouTube. And so that's why I put everything I do on YouTube. So I believe in document, don't create. It's Gary Vee says it all the time, but we make the coolest things in the world right here in Colorado. All we have to do is flip this camera around and show you what I'm doing today and bring you along for the ride. I'm just documenting what I'm doing. I'm not creating any fancy marketing or slogans or tagline and creative. I'm just saying, hey, look, we're cutting metal today and we're making cases. That's pretty cool. And so we just document all the stuff that we do. We put it on YouTube, and people that want to work here, or people that graduate from watchmaking schools, or engineers, machinists, etc. They're like, do I want to go work for one of these huge companies with no documentation, with nobody knows my name, or do I want to work for this kid out in Colorado trying to make watches in America and create American jobs and putting everything on YouTube? And for the right person, that's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to be on YouTube. But for the people I want to attract, they think that's the coolest thing ever. So that's how we do it.
Yeah. Document, don't create. Tyler, we need to think about that for our company, man. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like
All
it.
right. I got another one then. And this comes, we're bringing it back to the Sidekick life now. So the purpose behind the Sidekick life, number one, is we're all sidekicks as entrepreneurs, right? We are serving somebody, protecting somebody. We have somebody's back. So I'm really curious to hear your answer. Who would you say is your hero? Who do you serve? Who's the specific person that you're making products for?
Yeah. So, I'm a huge fan of Don Miller. Building a Story Brand was one of the first books I read as an entrepreneur. I say building a story brand and start with why. Like, read those 2 books between Don Miller and Simon Sinek. You can learn everything you need to know on how to create your first website, how to write all your own copy, how to set up email marketing and tell a story. But Don Miller says the customer is the hero. And that's my answer, is the customer, specifically the customer who sends us Grandpa's pocket watch. That's what keeps me going when times are a little bit hard, is like, we have this service that we call Convert Your Watch. And we're really one of the only people that do like what we do in general, just even making watches in America. But we're the one. If you want to send your Grandpa's pocket watch somewhere to have it restored or turned it into a wristwatch, you send it to us. And so we put that customer, on the pedestal. We build a whole system and kind of division of our company around serving that customer, telling their story throughout. They're making us part of the family. They're trusting us with Grandpa's watch. So I don't let you ship me Grandpa's watch. I ship you a box with custom cut foam and a pre-insured, pre-labeled box to send it back to me. It's a white glove service from start to finish. I take photos of the pocket watch that you sent and upload it into what we call the watch builder, which you can't find anywhere online publicly, but you can design Grandpa's pocket watch into a wristwatch with titanium or bronze or steel and see what it looks like on our website. I built that app just for those customers, right? We try to take, there's that service is $4,000 to $5,000. So it's not for everyone, but if we try to take 1 or 2 people a year that either can't afford it or it doesn't make sense for them and their family right now, and we do it anyway, and I say, hey, can we document your story? And so this year we're doing I don't know what to call it. Like, it's not really a scholarship, but it's like, we're just doing it for free. And we're doing it in exchange to document these people's stories, because we have some really cool stories. Grandpa was, an engineer on the railroad, and this pocket watch was used by great grandpa and grandfather and my dad. And it was used on the railroad. We're a railroad family, and that we're blue collar workers. And that's why I can't send you $5,000 today, RT, to turn this watch, And so you get goosebumps when you hear that, and you're like, all right, send me the watch. We got you. So we're trying to always tell those stories and talk about that as much as we can. We can only do that a few times a year, but that's really the core customer we serve, because most people don't have grandpa's pocket watch, and they just think what we do is cool, or they like our new company, Colorado Watch Company, fully modern watches, and they'd rather get one of those for a little less money. And they want to support us, but they want to support us because, to your point, we're the sidekick for that true core customer of like, yeah, we're part of the family for them.
So you said something there. This was so easy for you that you're going to do it again, is what I'm hearing. So tell me about this.
Let's talk about being delusional.
You have a new company. I mean, you're going to make watches again. So tell everybody about like the evolution. You're parked here in 2025. You got a new company, man. So tell everybody about that.
Yeah. Well, so we can, for Vortic Watch Company, we can only make about 400 watches a year. To everything we talked about, it's really the bottleneck is the watchmakers, and trying to restore the old pocket watches. I could probably push that to like 500, but 500 times 5,000, a $2.5 million business instead of a $2 million business, is the juice really isn't worth the squeeze there. So what I decided last year to do was to just keep Vortic awesome. Right. And we're going to make 300 to 400 watches a year. They're going to be amazing, perfect quality pieces of American history restored and preserved as a wristwatch. And to scale the company, because I'm delusional and I want to do it again. I want to grow, and I want to have hundreds of employees. That's the American dream to me, is like the perpetuation of it, right? It's not just enough that I have a house and a white picket fence. Like, what if I created that for 100 other people? That's really cool. So that's what I want. And I can't do that with the current brand. So to your point, I got to do it again. Colorado Watch Company was the way to solve that. And now Colorado Watch Company makes the most American made watch at scale. And so we found a company down in Arizona that's assembling watch movements. So modern automatic movements, everything you'd expect out of a modern Swiss watch for a couple $1,000s. We're assembling those movements in the USA. We're going to try to start making some of those parts as soon as possible. And then we're able to make here in Fort Collins almost everything else, the case, the crown, all the outside of the watch. And utilize all the engineers and machines and everything I've built for the last 10 years to now make thousands of watches, not just, dozens. And that's what Colorado Watch Company is. It's how do we take that original idea of let's make everything in America, but do it at scale for a reasonable price. So we're selling watches long-term. The price range will be about $700 to $2,500. Right now, I just have two watches that are $1,400 and $1,900. But they are 85% American made. And so what that means is for every $100 that you send, 85 of those dollars stays in the United States and it creates American jobs. And I'm trying to get 1% better every year. So over the next 15 years, I think we can make 100% of a watch in the USA. It's going to be really hard, but we've made it this far. So I think it's possible.
Yeah. I really like how mission driven you guys are. You can tell that you've thought through every part of your business to understand what's important to the customer, what's important to you, and to mesh it together. RT, one of the things that Tyler and I are committed to is we want to provide as many great stories, entrepreneurial stories, but then not just the watch, but how the watch is made in your terms. But what I mean by that is not just the business, but how the business is made, right? So would you talk a little bit about your team? Like, what does the team look like? We know about you, we know about the manufacturing team, but what about the rest of the team to support both watch companies?
Yeah. So when it comes down to team, the first person I have to talk about is my assistant, Lauren. And calling her my assistant is not fair. She is chief of staff. And I've had an assistant or a chief of staff, a right-hand woman, for the last 4.5 years. She's the second one. I had Bella before her for 2 years. And having a right hand, as you guys know, is just like, I don't know how people survive without it. You know, when you're a small business, like when I first hired Bella, that was 2020, I hired Bella as my assistant because I lost my mom in 2022, right around the time of the lawsuit. And my mom left me with 25 credit card accounts that I had to go through in her estate. And that overwhelmed the shit out of me. And so I said, hey, this might be temporary. It might be part-time. I don't know, but I can't do this and manage my mom's affairs while also trying to scale a company and defend us against the lawsuit. So I need some help. And so I used some of the money that I inherited from losing my mom to hire this young woman named Bella. And what that taught me was I'm not willing or able to live life without a right-hand, super organized integrator. If you go into the book Traction, right? You know, I'm a visionary and I need an integrator. So I always have an integrator, and that's my chief of staff. Currently it's Lauren. And then I have a director of operations. His name is Matt, and he manages all the other people. And so those two people manage day-to-day operations so that I can keep dreaming and I can keep working on the next thing and I can keep selling the next thing and I keep doing this kind of stuff with you guys. And then, then I have an engineering team. So I have 3 engineers that run the CNC machines and cut the metal and actually make the parts, here. And then I have a watchmaking team that does everything from restoring the pocket watches to actually building the final wristwatches. And then I'm building out a marketing and communications team. I have one person that does customer experience and talk to all the customers. I have one person that does operations and kind of, air traffic control inside the building, if that makes sense. And then I have one photographer and videographer who is, pumping out content for one person. We're doing as much as we can here. And I want to hire, at least 2 people in every role, 1 for redundancy, but 2 for scale. And that's really what I've been working on is, if you want to have work-life balance for all these people, because none of them are as crazy as me and work as much as I want to work. I found that having cross-training and having a sidekick, basically, I'm going to start calling them that actually.
Yeah, let's go.
If each one of my people has a wingman, then they can take some time off and not feel like they're letting me or the company down. And so that's really the next phase that I see over the next year or two is building out full departments in all of these things, but that's how I laid it out currently.
And also through this whole thing, he bought this amazing building in downtown Fort Collins and kind of rehabbed the whole thing. It's in a great spot in downtown. It's a beautiful building. It's got a cool logo on the outside that lights up right downtown. Very cool. So in the midst of all this, he did that as well. So, you're sitting here 2025. What's RT's life look like? Helping all these people, doing all this stuff for the last 10 years. What does your life look like as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, it's the American dream. I mean, to your point, I own the building that I sit in, the land underneath it. We have 8,500 square feet of space here. We're cutting the metal. We have millions of dollars worth of CNC equipment in here. There's 10 people in here that, that all get paid a salary to work for me and with me. I own a home and a rental property. I have a beautiful wife, 2 little kids, very supportive, home life structure. My wife's an entrepreneur too, so our dinner conversations can be about all this stuff. and that's not weird and that's okay. I have the house and the white picket fence and all the things that everybody wanted. And I told this to my friend the other day. I was just like, he asked me, how are you doing? And I said, Drew, I have everything that most people would ever want, and I'm bored. And so, yeah, I'm all in. I'm doing another thing. We're doing a Colorado watch company. I'm raising money right now from investors, which, as you guys know, is that's a whole nother job in itself. I'm talking to banks about financing another round of CNC machines and getting basically taking the machines that we have that are kind of like the Ford F-150s of CNC machines and going up to the Mercedes AMGs, right? Like we're at a level that we can afford this stuff and we can make the best things and we can use the best things to make them. And what most people, strive for, to answer your question, like I did it, right? Like it's so cool. But that's not enough for me. And what I've learned through all of this is that that's okay, right? Like I'm weird. I think I'm an acquired taste. But we only have one life here, and I want to have fun. And that's why I keep telling my team and everyone I talk to is just like, man, like we could have a really fun little business here, just taking pocket watches and turning them into wristwatches. And that'd be fun for most people, but it's just not fun for me. Like fun is the grind, it's the climb, it's the journey. And so we got to keep pushing. And yeah, like I said, knock on wood, I haven't messed it up yet.
I love that you use the word fun as one of the reasons, because a lot of people think business fun, but I totally resonate. And I think Tyler does too. It's like that first business, when you started, everything, for me anyway, it didn't really feel fun. It felt like life or death. It felt like I had to make it work. If I didn't make it work, I was going to be a failure. But when you can kind of shed away like the as many financial concerns, or I need to go prove myself out to the world, now it sort of becomes, I think, kind of like, I don't want this to sound too weird, but like a game, right? It's almost this game that you kind of understand how to win and how to play. And it's fun. It's hard at times. You got to make tough decisions, and there's people involved, and there's all those things that can make a day difficult. But business, once you figure it out and once you understand the pieces that need to go where, it becomes a heck of a lot of fun. It's a game. So I love that you use the word fun. I just wanted to say that because I can tell now when somebody says fun to me, it's like they're experienced. They know what they're doing. They've been through the hard stuff. Yeah. Good for you.
Well, dude, time to wrap it up, man, which is crazy, but that was an amazing story. Thank you for joining us today. So where can we find you and Vortic and anything else that's going on in your life right now?
Yeah, if you want to connect with me personally, Instagram or LinkedIn, it's just RT Custer, like Robert Thomas Custer, no periods, on both of those platforms. And then vorticwatches.com, like V as in Victor, ORTIC watches.com, or coloradowatchcompany.com. If you forget all of that, just, Google something about Colorado watches and you'll find me. That's what we do.
It's amazing, brother. Well, thank you. We're going to see you at dinner tonight, actually. So we'll catch up then, man. But thanks for joining us today. And see you soon, brother.
Appreciate you,
Thanks,
RT.
guys.
Keep grinding, bud.
Appreciate you.
Thanks for joining us on the Sidekick Life, where we highlight true sidekicks, entrepreneurs who've got their customers' backs, solve real-world problems, and after helping enough people, get to live the life they've always dreamed of. We'll see you next time.